What's up, guys? Welcome back. We are just about to dive straight into an overview for the Slate Digital Virtual Bus Compressors bundle. So you may have noticed that this comes in 4 separate plugins, notably the Virtual Bus Compressor Rack, which is a rack containing all 3 of the plugins, and then you also have the separate versions of each one. So you have the Slate Digital FG Grey, the FG Red, and the FG Moo, which make up the all 3 compressors that you have available to you. We'll cover each one separately shortly. We're just going to take a look at the rack quickly, just to look at one or two of the features in there, and just sort of the general operation of the shared controls, such as the preset and AB functions, etc. So looking at the rack first, we'll just quickly cover the controls. You have a drop-down menu here, which is your preset settings. You can save, delete, rename presets here, and browse through them on the right-hand side here. Save as, obviously that's fairly self-explanatory. You can tag them with author names, project names, notes for them, and so on and so on. That's kind of the way this works is pretty much the same with the VMR and everything as well throughout all the Slate plugins. Also the same as the VMR, as we discussed in the other tutorials. You have 2 different AB snapshots. You can set your settings on A and AB it with B. If you're happy with something here, you can copy it to B. So now you'll see B and A are exactly the same. So then you can actually make further modifications to A without needing to overwrite what you've done before. You can always just hop back to what you had at A by going back to B again. In the VBC rack, you have these little handles over here. This allows you to simply move the order of your compressors around. Pretty self-explanatory. The signal flow goes from top down, so whichever one is last in your chain would be the last at the bottom. Okay, we're going to close down the rack for now. The rack's a nice idea. I've never really found a reason to use all 3 compressors at exactly the same time. I think it's a little bit overkill that. I do often use 2 in series for handling different compression duties on a master. I'm not sure whether 3 is really all that necessary, but they do have some very different features in each of the compressors. So we're going to go through those now in a little bit more detail. So we will just load up. We're going to grab the VBC FG Grey to start off with. And if you didn't know, the FG Grey, although it doesn't look like it, this is based on an SSL 4000 bus compressor, the famous one that everybody knows, because there are so many different versions of this. I have the solid state logic one here as well. That is what it normally looks like on the actual discs. So this is pretty much the same. It's modeled on the same circuits as that one. They sound pretty similar. Obviously slightly different. Each one of these models is often slightly different. Although the Slate Digital one does have some handy features that are not available in the original one here. So we'll go through those quickly. You have a power switch, which is just the bypass for the plugin on the left-hand side here. Then heading over to our standard compressor controls, we have a attack and release dials. You'll see the attack is very much like the original SSL. There are set attack speeds ranging from 0.1, which is incredibly fast, 0.3, 1, 3, all the way right up to 100, which is pretty slow. We did discuss a lot of compressor types when we were doing the VMR. This falls into the VCA category, so it is quite a snappy little compressor, great for handling tight transients or like quite a bit of like transient heavy material, and it's very good at doing that quite quickly. Our release dial here all the way down to 0.1 as well, so incredibly fast acting compressor this, and up to 1.2. I don't think that is actually, that should be in milliseconds. Yeah, these are in milliseconds. Some of the other compressors later on you'll see are just numbers for the attack and release times, so they are set amounts as well. Our threshold, again, I'm not going to go into the operation of a compressor too much here. This is where you set your threshold for this particular compressor. And then your ratio as well. So you have ratios from 1 all the way up to 10, the same as the original SSL. Now, this is where we get a few extra features that are not available in the traditional SSL model. You have just the monitoring, so you can set the monitoring for the amount of gain reduction, or you can set, this would be the input value, how much input you're getting, and how much output you're getting after it's been through the compression stage and you have dialed in your makeup gain. But for the most part, you'll be wanting to see your gain reduction, so you'll notice that the dial goes all the way up to 0, and whatever it pulls down is how much the compressor is working. So you'd be able to see whether you're getting 3 dB or 4 dB, whatever gain reduction. They are quite small, but you do have this digital dial underneath, which also makes it a little bit easier to see. Then moving on to the final controls over here, we have a high pass filter. Super handy to have. This would let you dial a high pass filter into the detector phase of the compressor. So if you are using this on a master where you don't particularly want to squash too much of the bottom end out, you can roll off the high pass filter so that these sub frequencies would not trigger the compression at all. You can get this all the way up to around 150 hertz, so you can leave those subs coming through and then focus the compressor more on sort of high mid transients or low mid transients rather than squashing the track completely because of the subs triggering too much of the compression. And then lastly, you have a mix dial, again super handy for doing sort of compression tricks like parallel compression. You can over compress this quite nicely and then dial back small amounts of the mix just to kind of glue everything together. That's another feature that was not available on the original SSL version. However, there are other models I've seen add this mix dial. All the Slate ones have that, and it's a great little addition. So yeah, that's the FG Grey. We're going to move on to the FG Red next. And I mean, these being compressors, they all are similar, but they do have very different flavors and different applications as well. The FG Red is based on a Focusrite Red compressor. It's also a VCA, if I'm not mistaken. So similar to the SSL, the FG Grey, but I do find this far more rounded and smooth. I find the tone of this one a lot more. A lot nicer, a lot warmer, and nicer to work with than the FG Grey. So we'll just quickly run through the controls on this side again. This one, again, you have the threshold and your ratio. This one's incremental, 1.5 to so on and so on, all the way up to 10, just like the SSL model. The threshold fairly self-explanatory again. Your attack on this one, these are not milliseconds if I'm not mistaken. This is just numbered from 0 to 10. 4 is fairly slow compression on this as well. So it's not quite as fast as the FG Grey. You'd have to just kind of fill this out because it doesn't actually give you the actual times. Like I said, they're just labeled from 0 to 10. But often when I'm mastering, I find like a sort of medium attack speed for me, which is good, is around 4. It's not too fast around there, but you'll get a hang of it the more you use it. Moving over again, same as the FG Grey, you have your gain reduction set to in, gain reduction or out. Your auto release here. Highly recommend using this. This is it just sounds great on this compressor. They don't always get it right with all the compressors, but the auto release on this FG Red in particular has a really snappy feel to it. So you'll see auto release on will negate the use of this dial. It will grey that out, so you don't need to set that at all. And depending on the source material that you're using, the release will bounce back by itself without you needing to set the timing for that at all. Moving on, we have a drive circuit, which is pretty much just a harmonic distortion that you can drive a little bit harder on this compressor. It's very subtle, but does have quite a nice tone to add. Once again, you have the high pass filter, which allows you again to bleed through or to take out the subs from the detection phase again, allowing you to just compress the top end stuff. This one goes all the way up to 150 as well. A mix dial, same as before, and your makeup gain, obviously, to once you've set your compression, judging by your gain reduction that you have over here, you can dial the makeup gain up to zero your track, or to get your tracks to the same volume as they were before. So all in all, not a huge difference. There is a bit of a difference with the drive knob, but quite similar to the FG Grey. But they do have quite different tones. So again, my preference is to always use the red. I find this one very cool sounding. The FG Grey also great, but I get a lot more use out of this one than the Grey. Now the more different one out of the bunch, the FG Mu. So this is based on compressors, tube compressors like the variable or the Manley Verimu, or the Fairchild 610, and this has some nice features as well, including a stereo and mid-side matrix that you can compress with. So we're going to go through this one now as well. So being a tube compressor, the sort of material that you're going to be wanting to use this on is when you're trying to keep a sort of overall volume. It's great on vocals and things like that as well, and also great for mastering. But just bear in mind that the attack speed on this it's genuinely kind of geared to kind of maintaining an overall average volume. The detection phase doesn't actually detect the peaks. It's RMS or an average volume that it triggers the compressor with. So, for really sort of transient stuff like percussion and stuff, if you're trying to tame transients and that kind of thing, this is not really the one that you're usually going to sort of reach for. In an example where you're using two compressors, I would put like the FG Grey or Red before this to deal with sharper transients, and then this one as an extra compressor over the top just to kind of smooth things out. So let's just go from here. Again, your metering pretty much the same as the other ones. In, gain reduction, out. I'm not going to explain that one again. Power button down here. That'll just bypass the plugin. What is of interest here is the stereo and mid-side matrix selector. So obviously in stereo, your signal flow runs from input. It's split into left and right, and you have your left-right compression settings. And then if you decide to run it through the MS matrix, what would happen is your top dials here basically applied to the mid channel, and the bottom ones would apply to the side channels. So the side channels is basically an addition of the left and right phase flipped and encoded for MS. So all your side information on the left and the right would be on this section here. And all your mid or mono-compatible info would be on this one here. So let's just move through. This one works slightly differently in that you do have a threshold, but you have an input and an output, not like the other ones, which just has threshold and makeup gain. You can actually drive this one harder with the input and then apply the threshold to it afterwards. And then your outgain, which would be your gain makeup after your compression has been happening. The stereo linking, stereo link basically when you have this set to on, you'll see that the left and right channels would work together, which is generally what you're going to be doing if you're using this in stereo mode. So you'll see that everything is linked, including these ones here. Any settings you make will be linked together. You can turn that off and do this on the left and right channels separately. But where this really becomes handy is when you have this running in mid-side mode. You can dial in separate compression for the mids. So let's say you want to compress your sort of kick and bass a little bit harder. You could do that here and maybe add less compression to the sides so that you have more dynamic movement in the sides, which would result in a like more lively and dynamic mix. Okay, then just moving on to the final controls here, you've got the usual, like we did with the other ones, you've got your attack speed, and again, this one just runs from 0 to 5. These are not in milliseconds, they are just numbered from 0 to 5. And your high pass filters, again, which would just remove the subs from the detection phase so that you're not squashing too much when you have a lot of bass heavy content coming through here. And finally, the mix dial, again, same story with this one. It allows you to do some parallel compression and just dial in small amounts of this. Right, so that pretty much covers the overview for the virtual bus compressors. We are going to go into more detail as to how to use these, on what kind of material you want to use them on as well, when we get to the practical sections. So stay tuned, we're going to go over the overviews for some of the other mastering products, and then we'll get down to doing a stem mix and then mastering from there with some of these compressors. Cool, I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.
Thanks everybody for watching, commenting and indeed liking. We really do appreciate all the support we get here on our Sonic Academy YouTube channel. So if you found this video super useful, please, we'd love you to hit the subscribe button. We update the YouTube channel every week with new content. And if you want to watch some more relevant content, just click on the videos beside me.